Let's get to Julie Kelly now. She's the author of the Declassified by Julie Kelly Substack and the book January 6, How Democrats Used the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Julie, good to have you back with us.
Hey, Vince. Thanks so much for having me on.
I don't want to dwell too long on Stormy Daniels here. Who wants to, really? But her testimony today, this is just an effort to tar and feather Donald Trump, right? I don't actually understand what the purpose of this is, if it involves anything about a bookkeeping crime that's alleged by Alvin Bragg.
I mean, it is really a disgraceful attempt to humiliate him, to humiliate his wife. They're bringing up questions about Melania. This is so grotesque, Vince, on so many levels. These prosecutors and Alvin Bragg and this judge are just real lowlifes, and they don't care how they drag the American judicial legal system really to the bottom of the muck.
Yes.
As long as they, first of all, get their headlines, and number two, somehow, get a conviction here.
Yeah.
But today was a really disgraceful day.
And as I understand it, Stormy Daniels, I guess, from the stand was making all sorts of detailed allegations about sexual conduct that she may have engaged in with Donald Trump at some point. And again, I don't know what that has to do with a bookkeeping crime at all. But in the process, Trump's team kept making objections. And when they finally came back from a recess, Trump's team says, hey, we're going to seek a mistrial here because this is just entirely prejudicial. This is insane. All you're doing is trying to leave the jury with some sort of really toxic impression of Trump that has nothing to do with the crimes that are alleged, Julie.
Correct. And apparently from some reporting, and Judge Merchan, who is, of course, presiding over this circus, this farce, I think even he started to realize that it was backfiring, warned the prosecution, let's keep your witness on track here.
Yeah.
Apparently she was slurring. She was making sexual comments from the stand. But now, but the prosecutors were asking Stormy Daniels for details about this alleged sexual encounter. She was not just offering it. These are government lawyers asking this piece of trash, who we know has already lied and had to pay Donald Trump for lying, and asking this a piece of trash prosecutor, a piece of trash witness, asking details that can't be proven or disproven, quite frankly, about this alleged sexual encounter. Just despicable. And apparently even the jury was starting to repel about the details in Stormy Daniels' performance today.
Wow. And just so this is a live, obviously, interview and conversation. And we are seeing images, Donald Trump having stepped out of the courtroom just as Julie was speaking, pumped his fist to the press and kept walking, didn't stop to speak to them at all. Let me move on to another case involving Donald Trump. This is the document dispute with the Biden administration led by Jack Smith. There were some court filings on Friday that seem to indicate that the FBI is now admitting, and Jack Smith is admitting, that the federal government has mishandled the evidence in this case. And in fact, it looks like planted evidence at the scene in Mar-a-Lago by bringing classified document cover sheets and placing them over whatever they had placed all over the floor and tried to, misrepresent Trump as some sort of reckless keeper of the nation's secrets. What can you tell us?
Right. So this was a late Friday night filing by Jack Smith, which is, of course, always a red flag that everyone should immediately run and see what dirt the government is trying to hide. And certainly this was the case. Finally, after more than 20 months of that infamous photo of alleged classified documents sprawled on the floor of Mar-a-Lago representing the contraband that FBI agents seized out of Mar-a-Lago, what we finally learned, actually what I pieced together, I went back to that court filing where that photo was attached back in August of 2022. Fast forward to both defense motions and Jack Smith's motion that proves, and Jack Smith admitted this, that FBI agents brought to the raid those colored cover sheets denoting various classification levels. Now, the excuse that Jack Smith gave is that those cover sheets were going to be used as placeholders within boxes, as you can imagine, boxes that have a lot of other content, a lot of other files. So what FBI agents allegedly were doing, taking the so-called classified document out of that box, replacing it with one of these cover sheets to indicate to investigators later on this is where it was found. Well, guess what else they used it for? For the photo stunt, meaning they doctored evidence, because Vince, there's no way for us to know that this cover sheet, blaring red, top secret human intel cover sheet, that actually represented the document that they paper clipped to that cover sheet that was spread on the floor. There were at least 7 of these cover sheets attached to various documents. So that was a stunt. They doctored evidence. They were taking classified materials. And how do we even know that the FBI agents were accurate? Were they also intelligence experts as they were raiding Mar-a-Lago? So this was all another political stunt.
Well, isn't there also
misleading the public and misleading the judge on this as well?
Isn't there also a dispute about whether the documents were classified at all? So that the federal government could be lying in the court filing by declaring documents that have been declassified to actually be classified. Wouldn't that be lying to the court?
Well, the search warrant, as you will recall, authorized the FBI to take any papers that had classified markings on them of any kind. But to your point, Vince, that doesn't mean that the FBI agent would know if that particular record has been declassified, because it's not like you take a big stamp and say, oh, this is declassified. So they naturally would not know.
Well, not especially if you're the president. Whatever the procedures might be outside of the president of the United States, there's a process for that. But this is the president of the United States. He can declassify information at whim. He can take a piece of paper and hand it to a civilian that says classified all over it and say, read this out. You can do that.
Right. So in addition to the doctoring of the photo and questions as to how these FBI agents knew for sure that these records were classified in the way that they denoted in these cover sheets, more, I think, damaging and problematic for Jack Smith is 2 other revelations. Number one, that the placeholders are not in the same location that they were after the initial raid. And this is something that Jack Smith admitted to, that the condition of the 34 some odd boxes that they took out of Mar-a-Lago are not in the same condition. The contents are not in the same order as they were after the raid. Well, the question is, why not? And he gave excuses. Well, some of the boxes had smaller items like index cards and books, so material shifted around because, of course, they flew the boxes from Miami to the hopelessly corrupt Washington FBI field office where the investigation took place. Even more problematic, and this is what we're waiting for Judge Cannon to rule on this week, another order, is that the cover sheets that they used as both a prop and a placement, Jack Smith just admitted that they can't connect that placement sheet with the actual document that they took out of the box. How then are you going to use these classified documents if one of them represents one of the espionage counts or the obstruction count? How can you lose track between a placement sheet and the actual classified document that's supposed to represent a crime? So this is imploding on many levels. Judge Cannon has now put off an important hearing that's supposed to take place this week. She has delayed it. She said she is going to issue another order this week in relation to these new revelations that came out last week.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to get to next is Eileen Cannon. Do you get the sense that she's going to suffer this for much longer? How strict is she going to become with Jack Smith?
I mean, I know there are some suggestions that she might issue contempt of court because another major scandal here is that Jay Bratt, the lead prosecutor for Jack Smith, intentionally misled Judge Cannon in a hearing last month. I was there. It was April 14th hearing. She directly asked Jay Bratt, are these boxes, because the defense attorneys were already complaining about the access and the condition of the contents of these boxes. And she said, are they in the original intact form as when they were seized? Jay Bratt replies, yes, they were, with the exception of the classified document being replaced by a placeholder. Okay, fine. That is a lie. And Jack Smith had to admit it in his filing in a footnote last Friday, saying, we do admit that this was not the proper characterization of how we described it, the government described it during that hearing. No, you lied. Because Jay Bratt has known, he's been on this investigation since the beginning. He was at Mar-a-Lago in June of 2022 to retrieve documents for the subpoena. He knows this inside and out. He knows that those boxes have been disturbed. He knows that the evidence and contents inside of them have been shifted around. And now he knows that the placeholder piece of paper does not match the records in some instances of the evidence that they have against Donald Trump and his co-defendants. She stayed this order for this important hearing that was supposed to take place. She said she's going to issue an order soon. I expect she is going to, rip a you-know-what on Jack Smith and the government, because she's been watching this event since October of 2022, which is why she appointed a third party, told the DOJ and FBI, I don't trust you to go through this evidence appropriately. Remember, she appointed the special master. She was overturned by the appellate court. This is exactly why. She has known from day one how dirty this case is. It's gotten even dirtier. That's why she's unsealing and unredacting information so the American people can see it. And now Jack Smith has walked right into it, and she's not going to let him off the hook.
I hope she doesn't, because I feel like, out of all the judges that are handling these cases, she seems to be the only one with a semblance of real fairness. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are others, but she should use her perch to really smack them down, because the tyranny is just out of control. I mean, you're watching all of these cases really closely. And they're not following the standard procedures or rules that most Americans are supposed to be afforded.
Exactly right. And she is extremely tough. She is very smart. She's very thorough and prepared for her court hearings. She already suggested, as soon as she got this classified documents case, that the defense should file something related to grand jury abuse, which is also something we're expecting to see grand jury materials, because the investigation took place in the Trump-hating cauldron of Washington, D.C. in that federal courthouse, so they could get whatever they wanted out of the Democratic judges there, which they did. And now she is looking for information about how that grand jury process went down. There's also allegations of prosecutorial abuse by Jay Bratt, threatening one of Trump's, his co-defendant's lawyer, threatening that he would scuttle a judicial nomination application that this defense attorney had if he did not get Walt Nauta, a very close personal aide to Donald Trump, did not get him to flip against Trump and become a government witness. When Donald Trump calls these people thugs, he's actually being too nice. This is as dirty, as dishonest, as low life and corrupt as you can possibly imagine. And fortunately, at least in this instance, we have a judge who is courageous enough and tough enough and is fed up with this, that she is not going to let Jack Smith get away with this as much as she possibly can restrain him from doing so.
All right. Julie Kelly, thank you as always for your coverage of this important topic and so many others. Again, you can get to her at the Declassified by Julie Kelly Substack. Thank you, Julie, so much.
Thanks, Vince, for having me on.